Hello, good listeners. Welcome to Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives, a show about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. I'm your host, Dan Dick. Last week, we brought you part one of a conversation I had with novelist and satirist Andrew Unger when we spoke a couple of months ago. Andrew is the creative mind behind the satirical and mostly Mennonite news site, the Unger Review. He's also the award-winning author of Once Removed. He daylights as a high school English teacher. Here's part two of our conversation. To make the most of this episode, you may want to listen to part one first. As a public speaker, you have addressed classrooms and book lovers and other writers. What are some of the most intriguing questions you've had from audiences?
Yeah. Sometimes people ask things like, where do you keep coming up with ideas? You know, how do you keep coming up with ideas after this many years? And to me, when people ask that, I think, oh, well, it never even dawned on me that would be difficult. But I could see how someone that's not doing it is like, you've written 3,000 articles? How on earth did you do that? But it's not 3,000 articles at once. It's one a day-ish, right? And a journalist once asked me about that, and I said, well, if you can keep coming up with the real news, I could probably keep coming up with the fake variety.
Satire is not a finite resource.
No, exactly.
In just a couple of generations, Mennonites in Manitoba have shifted from speaking mostly Low German to speaking mostly English, though quite a few are still bilingual. Did the shift from Low German to English impact what Mennonites saw as funny?
I think, yes, it did. Because in the past, now I'm not a fluent Low German speaker by any means, so I'm basing this on what I've read and what people have told me. But in the past, I think that a lot of the humor was found in Low German itself. And in fact, Ruben Epp once wrote that he felt that Arnold Dick had done Mennonites a disservice by sort of giving the impression that Low German was only capable of expressing humorous ideas, because people associated Arnold Dick's writings with humor, and thus they associated Low German with humor. And Ruben Epp kind of pushed against this and said, no, Low German, Plautdietsch can be used for both humor and serious ideas. But there is a sense, if you look at the words, you just look through a Plautdietsch dictionary, you look through Jack Thiessen's dictionary, the words are very literal, they're humorous, like at least to an English speaker. When you lose that, when you lose the language, then the humor becomes something else. So I definitely think the sarcastic, satirical type of humor is a more recent addition to the Mennonite humor repertoire that maybe wasn't there 50, 60, 70 years ago. I think the shift sort of in terms of literature started happening with Armin Wiebe, and then especially, Miriam Toews' works are often quite sarcastic and funny. You started to see this shift from earthy humor to ironic humor. And of course, both of those still exist in my writing and in other Mennonite humor writing. But I think the irony might have been completely absent 100 years ago, and now it's more present.
There's Low German words, like in the Low German dictionary, and just listening to them, that are very onomatopoeic as well.
Right.
Like brumsch.
Yeah.
Means grumpy, and it just sounds grumpy.
Yeah.
Or sput.
Yeah.
Is making fun of something. That's what you do. You're a sputter in
right.
your satirical work. And it's such an expressive word just by the way it sounds.
Yeah. And I don't know enough about the history of Low German to know if that was the actual origin of these words, or if it sort of just sounds that way to our ears now. But it's definitely, as someone that's not fluent in Low German, sometimes I don't even know what a word means. It sounds funny anyways.
You must keep a close eye on all kinds of news. Do you get a kind of tingly feeling when something feels ripe for a good comic interrogation?
Yeah, there are times when I'm looking at the news. Of course, I'm not always writing about the news, but when I am, there are times when I'm looking through the news, looking for something, and there's nothing. there's things that are happening, but they haven't captured the public's attention enough that you can spot them, right? So that happens sometimes. And other times, something is so obvious, or the headline, I almost don't even need to change the headline. I just change the headline slightly. Or especially when, in rare occasions, Mennonites make the news, especially nationally. Like there was that example of that hockey player, the OHL hockey player earlier this year, who was suspended for, quote, calling another player a Mennonite, as if that was a slur or something.
That was hilarious.
Maybe the player used it in that way. I don't know. So they never disclosed the full details on who said what to who, other than that he was suspended for calling someone a Mennonite. Of course, that's almost satirical right away. So when I saw that, of course, I have to write about that.
Can you predict if a certain theme or story subject is really going to take off with readers?
You would think that after doing this, more than 9 years, that I would be able to. I think sometimes I can predict it, but other times it doesn't. It doesn't have the reaction that I think, or something that I thought wouldn't get much of a reaction does. And to some degree, that is social media algorithms. It's not necessarily the audience's natural reaction. I think if on the internet all we had was the audience's natural reaction, if everything was completely organic, that your articles or whatever would be seen exactly by the amount of people that wanted to see them, rather than by some algorithm that who knows why it's showing what to who, right? I think if it was completely organic, I think I'd have a pretty good sense, this article is going to do well, this one maybe not so much, right? But as it is, it's often surprising because you just really never know. Sometimes it's the timing. If I had posted that article, maybe I posted it too soon. Like let's say it's referring to the real news. I posted it the same afternoon. Well, maybe not everybody had seen the original news item, right? So I posted too soon. You could post it too late. No one's talking about that anymore. So it is really a trial and error thing, and it is still, to some degree, unpredictable.
Can you give me an example of an Unger review story that surprisingly took off, or one that turned out to be a real dud?
I did one about, something about Mennonites, and these were the idea was there was horse and buggy Mennonites clash with Hell's Angels at a Sturgis motorcycle rally. I wrote about that, and if you read the article, they're selling quilts, and they're holding a quilt auction right on the main drag there and stuff like that. And that one exploded to the point where Snopes.com, it's a fact-checking website, had to fact-check it and say, it said, they basically said, it should have been obvious to people this is satire, because if you read the article, it's obvious. But, so that one, I would have no idea why would that versus any other article, kind of explode and go viral, So sometimes, that one was definitely surprising.
How do you think popular culture has changed what Mennonites deem funny?
I definitely think that has an impact. We talked earlier about how the shift from Low German to English changed the humor, and I definitely think popular culture, for lack of a better word, if you want to say, Mennonites have become assimilated in the sense that they are consuming, a lot of Mennonites anyways, the same popular culture as everyone else, the same television shows and movies and so on. And so therefore, naturally, our humor is going to be similar, maybe not similar in content, but similar in tone or style. I grew up in the 90s watching The Simpsons, which you could say is a form of Mennonite humor because Matt Groening does have that ancestry. But nevertheless, the sort of sarcastic humor of The Simpsons, and like David Letterman that I grew up watching. And I think I'm obviously not the only one, at least of my generation, that grew up with all of that popular culture and the music and all that sort of stuff. So I think, look at it this way. Look at how popular culture has influenced, not in every church, but it's influenced what music gets played in church and the style of music. So of course, it's also going to impact our humor as well too. For better or worse, whatever people think about that, it definitely has an impact.
Do you think Mennonites are taking life more or less seriously than they historically used to?
I definitely think less seriously. And I'm talking about the Mennonites that I know, that I'm familiar with, so I can't speak about all Mennonites, but I definitely think it's less serious. If when I've read in my, grandfather's, I should say my great uncle's diaries about growing up in Steinbach among the Kleine Gemeinde in the 1930s, they took life very seriously to the point where laughter was frowned upon. Like, you weren't really supposed to laugh out loud. That was frivolous. So at least, in my own family background, like half my family's Kanadier Kleine Gemeinde and half is Russlander MB. But on the Kleine Gemeinde side anyways, definitely we take things less seriously than we once did.
We're living in a time when satire and satirists themselves have become targets to rage against, and there seems to be a growing fear, or at least a discomfort and distaste, of artists who poke fun at subjects or revered institutions. Is there a line you won't cross or target that is too sacred to aim your critical thinking at?
There's some subtle distinctions here that I make. I feel that there's lines that I won't cross. I feel that's more of a instinct I have than a set of rules. Whether that matches everyone else's line, I don't know. But definitely, I don't believe in a free-for-all where everybody can be made fun of for everything. I don't believe in that. But I do believe I don't have a list of, topics or whatever. In terms of people, I think everyone is a potential target. Like, I don't believe there's any person who's untouchable. If you say that a person is untouchable, then you're saying that they're perfect. And they're saying that you're saying that they have no flaws. Now, the question is, what are you targeting them about? If you're targeting something about somebody that they didn't choose and cannot change, some aspect of themselves that they didn't choose and cannot change, that seems like a completely misuse of satire. If the satire is supposed to improve society somehow, why are you targeting things about people that they didn't choose about themselves or can't change about themselves? But that being said, every human makes choices. Every human has opinions. Every human, therefore, has flaws. So that's kind of how I like to think of it, but I don't have a set of criteria or a set of rules. It's more of just an instinct, and that may not match with another person's instinct on those things, but I feel like my humor is not particularly edgy, but other people feel that it is. So,
Andrew, this has been a very enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for entertaining all my curious questions.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
That concludes the second and final part of my conversation with Andrew Unger, satirist and novelist and creative mind behind the Mennonite satire website, The Unger Review. To learn more about Andrew's writing, visit ungerreview.com. His books are part of the collections at the MHA. To listen to this episode again, visit mharchives.ca. We welcome your questions and comments about this program. Just send us an email at info@mharchives.ca.
Hello, I'm Archivist Conrad Stace. The Mennonite Heritage Archives is a community-supported memory center that relies on donations from community members like you. To support this program and the preservation of Mennonite history, visit mharchives.ca and click on Support, or give us a call at 204-560-1998. Thanks also to our partners, Canadian Mennonite University, the Centre for Transnational Mennonite Studies, Mennonite Church Canada, and Golden West Radio.
In an upcoming episode, we'll share the story of how microfilms now at the MHA reveal a link between Mennonites and the vaccination campaign of Catherine the Great, who ruled Imperial Russia from 1762 to 1796. Thanks to the Tales team of Conrad Stace and David Klippenstein, Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives will be back next week with more stories about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. Thanks for listening.